worry about making notes.
Yeah. Okay. Recording has started. There we are. Okay. Well, what I propose, I'll just do the introduction now, and as people join, then they can join in. So. Okay, well, welcome everyone, and again, thank you all for giving up your time. I don't think we need to go through introductions this morning because time is of the essence, and I think most of us have met each other in various online forums anyway. So today is a roundtable discussion where we're going to be tracking the journey of an active fire safety product, namely natural smoke ventilator, an AOV, through the REBA stages. Scott Sanderson from PRP is running a parallel group meeting at the same time now, and they've picked a cavity barrier as their passive fire safety product, and then both are being recorded. We'll pull those recordings together and hopefully pick out some nuggets from both of those. We hope that today's discussion and Scott's discussion will help identify key data which stakeholders need to improve fire safety, the golden thread. We've got a wide range of stakeholders in the group with an awful lot of experience. And the beauty of this is that by having designers, developers, contractors, manufacturers, advisors and operators in the room, we can share the experiences and actually start to get a good understanding of each other's needs, because it's the data that we all need which fundamentally is critical to getting a successful product installed properly on site, fundamentally, so it's going to do what it needs to do at the end of the day. It's a very niche product, but for the purposes of this exercise, we've gone for niche products to enable us to go into a very granular level, so we can drill right the way down to nuts and bolts, because what we've found is by having, again, going back, by having an understanding of the nuts and bolts, that's critical to the overall success of the product deploying properly when it's needed to do. So don't worry about we can park the general things, but feel free to really go down into some nuts and bolts granular level. I circulated an Excel template yesterday, which has got some question sets on there. I propose to use this as our sort of broad agenda, working left to right. But today's exercise isn't about necessarily answering the questions I put on there. Those questions are there to spur discussion. And please, if you have experience or you have strong thoughts about anything, please chip in. It is recorded, so everything will be captured, but please, it's not just about answering it's not formulaic, it's a roundtable discussion to pull out various information from everybody's contribution. I suggest we work through till 11 o'clock in the first session, have a 10-minute break then, and then come back for the final session. And to begin with, I think it would be useful just to set a context if I share my screen, and I'll just take you through. I did actually send it out on email, but just to give you an example of the product we're talking about, and that will give us a high level understanding of the discussions. So let me just. You all got that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so talking about smoke ventilation, principal reason is to act as a means to improve means of escape, so we keep the escape areas clear. The type of product we're looking at is typically an end of corridor AOV opening vent or NSHEV, natural smoke and heat ventilator, that's going to take the form of a window, or in a punch hole scenario, or it could be even in a curtain wall screen. These vents are typically side hung, bottom hung, or potentially a louvered vent on the exterior of the building. But obviously for them to operate, there needs to be some kind of control system providing power, detection, override that sits behind. For the purposes of today's discussion, I'm proposing that we keep it pretty simple and we follow approved document B. So it's talking about a fire engineered solution. We're talking about the product being deployed in what is quite a prescriptive solution. So, but behind ADB, obviously we have other documents that can be referenced, including product standards. So a natural smoke ventilator falls under a harmonized European product standard, therefore is part of the CPR, the Construction Products Regulation. And when the organization places the product on the market, they need to issue what's called a DOP, a Declaration of Performance. And that declaration of performance says, right, this product, the product is the vent and the drive actuator all together, operating together. When they place it on the market, they have to declare what are called essential characteristics. So these are standard characteristics that would be declared by the manufacturer of their natural smoke vent. And this is really important when we drill into this, because ADB will set out a requirement for what's called a free area, and that free area is validated by the declaration of performance by the manufacturer. And so typically, for instance, where are we? So a declaration of performance would have the essential characteristics on within its body, and that may have a supplementary schedule which sets out the size of the vent, the height and the width, the opening angle, and then what's called the aerodynamic free area, which is one of the declared essential characteristics. Then obviously I mentioned that this product needs to activate in a certain way. Right, that goes straight into the fire strategy. How does the design, what is the design intent? How do we need this system to operate? And that's typically illustrated in some critical data, which is the cause and effect schedule. And so that will determine how the system works. And then there's some supplementary standards, British standards, which help us through the design, commissioning, installation, and ongoing maintenance. So that's a reference document. Again, there's the need for data generation and data capture there. Competence. Competence is a significant area of concern that was raised by Hackett, and just as an industry, the smoke control industry has introduced a third-party certification scheme for competence, underwritten by UCAS. So again, one of the key areas of golden thread is to make sure whoever designed and installed the fire safety product was competent to do so. We need to think about capturing that. And then into the occupancy stage, what we're talking about here is a dynamic system. So it has to be in its quiescent state. It has to be ready to operate. And this is where it gets actually quite exciting, because this is where we start to explore potentially real-time data from site, feeding directly into the operator's asset information model and giving real-time status. So that's kind of the journey that we're going to be talking through. So before I move to the templates, anybody have any questions?
No, none for me there.
Okay, so right, everybody's microphones open.
Yes.
So in the first two REBA stages, 0 and 1, which is the briefing stage, my first question would be, does anybody believe that there needs to be any thoughts about the smoke ventilation product or system at this stage?
Yes.
Okay, so expand.
Yeah, I think that we should be having, at that early stage, we should be having a data template for it that is the asset information requirement. So at stage 0, in other words, it's not the project itself, but what we should be doing is having defined what type of information we need to have about a VAV. Sorry, that's not AOV. Yeah, smoke vent. Yeah. And that's something that we ought to have in the hacked housing data standards thing that we're working on at the moment. So it's basically the definition of that. There's also a spec or a data template that MBS have created for automatic opening vent as well. And I imagine it appears they've not done it, but SIBSI, I would have thought, should have one as well. So in other words, it needs to be a data template of the attribute information that should be being collected, I would say.
Anybody have any thoughts, comments on that?
I would agree. It's if you like, it's you start off obviously with you've got your OIRs, your AIRs, and EIRs, and they all are in place, if you like, before you get into the later stages. So they're about that, what that data set should be. So hopefully an architect, before he starts working to this design, has received the EIRs for a project, which should define exactly what we're talking about in terms of the data sets that are required. Also, from a client perspective, we might wish to try and standardize the AOVs we have across our schemes for maintenance reasons and things. So any designer will need to understand what our wishes are as a client from the outset. So yeah, there's definitely some things need to go in there.
And that would fall under the 0 or 1 or 0 and 1.
It's almost like before you even make a decision to build anything, because you need all of this information together first, and then when you go into REBA stage 0, you start it by going, here's what we require, here's the outcome we require data wise, and what we may require for installation.
The other thing I would say, Will, is that there's also it's not just. I think there's 3 elements to this. One is the asset type itself. The other is the system that it's likely to form part of, and the third is the spaces that those systems are supporting. So all 3 of those, I think, should be defined as property sets, as you know, if you like, sets of requirements, data requirements at a strategic level, and then they should be developed as things then move forward.
So in the BIM sort of documentation, stage 0, the strategic definition, is that not the AIRs? And then stage 1, preparation and briefing, is your EIRs. So you start off with what your strategic information needs to be, and then you specify it specifically for a project in the preparation and briefing before an architect starts working.
I agree. And the other element in there, James, is the OIR. So the organisation information requirements.
Which should sit above that, which should already in place. Yeah. I mean, it depends. As I say, there's a lot of debate, obviously, about what OIRs and AIRs should include. I mean, our first go at them was OIRs were very, very high level when we put them together. Our first sort of draft set, very high level. As an organisation, what information requirements do we want? Well, we need information on our assets to do A, B, and C. And then our AIRs were then okay to do that. This is what information we need in more detail. So, in terms of actually the REBA stages, you're right. The OIRs and AIRs are both part of that strategy, but for me, it's the AIRs, which are the more key document that will be used by any designer and anybody putting together EIRs.
Yeah, I agree, James. The thing is really in the BIM community, the concept of the OIR is something that is not clear. Yeah. So if I could just explain the clarity that we're trying to impose on this, and it's relevant to this, Will. So we're not just talking around it.
Please carry on.
The thing that we're using OIRs for is the room data requirements and activities. So I don't know if you're familiar with the way healthcare and education is done, but basically the way you start your briefing is by identifying what type of activities you're expecting to be carried out within this building.
Yeah.
So from
in healthcare,
right. Okay. So you see what I'm coming from. Yeah. So the approach that we're taking is that what in healthcare is called ADB, the activity database, which is the briefing methodology. What we're working with BRE and others to do is to try and refine that so that we've got one for residential. So it means that you could take the housing standards, as it were, to say what type of lighting, acoustics, temperature, ventilation you ought to have for certain types of spaces, and also what type of activities are going to be in those spaces, so that you're starting there with the organizational information requirements. In other words, how is that building going to be used? And then how can you then look at things like escape strategies and things like that, because you've then got something that relates to the way the spaces are used and the interrelationship of the spaces. What you've then got is the asset information requirement, which are the things that you're putting in those spaces to enable those activities to be done safely and efficiently. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you're quite right that the OIR and the AIR then form the EIR, which unfortunately people have changed from employers information requirement, which I think is the right term, to exchange information requirement. But in any case, it needs to be what the client's asking for. And then that then forms part of the PIR, which is the project information requirements, which is probably then, as you say, applied at REBA stage 1 to 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
If I could add something there, excuse me, the RIBA stage 0 has got the suggested key support tasks, which is review feedback from previous projects, which I think would probably be key for clients as well. If there is a product that wants to be used across projects, etc., then it's knowing how how did that work moving on throughout the stage of a project, and the product itself in its entirety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, well, moving left to right, looking at that first question in cell D7. is smoke ventilation needed? So we've talked about product requirements, but fundamentally we've got to decide what products are needed. So in this instance, obviously we're assuming, yes, you do need AOVs, but at what point and where would we look to capture the design input that says AOVs are required?
I'm not an architect. However, I mean, you might say that the concept design's early for thinking about that, but I actually think that is the right place to put it, because sometimes AOVs are an afterthought.
Yeah.
And getting them in there early in the concept design and thinking about it would create better design.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely it needs to be in that stage. Yeah.
I guess from the exercise here, identifying the critical information and thinking back to a golden thread, that you're absolutely right, because that decision is key. Who's deciding, or what are we recording that says why AOVs are included or not? And that's an open question. So the design criteria, there has to be a yes/no gateway to say we do need smoke vents, we don't, and okay, in this instance I've gone, well, the starter for 10 is the approved document. I mean, typically where might that be recorded digitally? Because for me that's a fundamental part of the golden thread.
Bill, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, sorry about this. I'm juggling at the moment. I think it's absolutely. Sorry, I've been listening to this. Kind of. I think we do need this right at the start. I mean, the fire strategy needs to be recorded at the initial stage. You cannot go ahead without knowing how you're going to get the means of escape working. And if you've got a fire engineered solution that requires smoke vents, you better record that quite up front. I don't know, because you can't afford it. You can't go forward with a building that does not comply with building regs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so
and in one of the things that came out in terms of competence, Bill, is typically how would that decision be validated, and who would be validated, and what's the competence register of the person doing that fire design?
Yeah, well, I think everybody's running for the hills at the moment. You can't get PI for that sort of stuff, but presumably that's going to settle down. And somewhere along the line, there will be a person who has been given the job of saying this building is safe at that particular stage. It's an initial gateway, surely. Mm-hmm. And that will be. It could be I don't know who it would be, but
traditionally, though, at this stage, it would fall upon the architect surely to design a building in accordance with building regs. I mean, not going any further than building regs, but at the moment, but
well, they quite often don't.
No, but
well, that's what this is all about.
Yeah,
exactly.
So this is
how do you as a client, this is the difficulty. If you start doing that, if you start dictating as a client, we want an AOV in this building because of X, Y, and Z reason, you then got to, as a client, keep up to date with exactly how things should be designed and built. So essentially you're hiring an architect in the company to do that.
We become a designer.
Yeah.
And have to do
I don't think it's
assessments.
Not,
if as soon as we start specifying we want certain things like that, we take design responsibility, don't we?
See,
Yeah.
I think going through the AIRs, EIRs, we should specify that there should be a thing in there to say we require a building to be built as per building regulations as a standard coverall. But then going into if an AOV is to be used, these are the requirements for the AOV, etc. But I don't think necessarily it's for the client to decide that an AOV is required in that specific building at this early stage.
I would agree entirely. I would say the client is not the client is responsible for making sure that that design has been considered, and that the client needs to know that somebody has thought about it. But I would say, you need to know that the building has been made safe, and the person who's designing it is competent to make that judgment. But
yeah, so at stages 0 and 1, we're giving them our requirements and saying we need this building to be safe and designed for these activities to be carried out in these spaces.
Yeah. But if the building has not been designed, then you don't need to say that. Just say it's got to have
concept design is where I get what you mean with with George. You were saying that you need some way of us, the client or the golden thread bit, recording a point in time where whoever it was, the architect perhaps, decided that building requires a fire alarm, an AOV, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how you do that, because it's almost like you've got to provide the architect I guess in the OIRs and stuff like that, you've got to provide them a thing to say, if this is required, when it gets to this stage and you've designed it and you've decided that an AOV is required, you need to provide us why, the information, the why. And that could be, it is required because this building is X, Y, and Z as per building regs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, could it be that at this early stage that you actually hold against spaces that they are likely to form part of areas that are going to need smoke protection, as it were? I'm just wondering if that, rather than what would the design process be that would then result in an AOV being required? Is there something we could add to spaces or something like that we could require, Bill?
You would be looking at communal areas, corridors, etc., which would be the space that you could allocate to that, and travel distances. So for me, what I'm listening to is you've got 0 and 1 is probably more of a performance criteria coming from the client, saying if there is an AOV required, this is what we'd expect to see from it as such. Then when you get into stage 2, that is spatial requirements, the layout design, what is the AOV? Is it punched through the wall? Is it a smoke shaft running to roof, etc.? That should definitely be considered and designed along with ADB. I think the point there at concept design is if you've got parameters outside of ADB, then it becomes a fire engineered solution, and that should then be noted at that point in concept, saying actually we're outside the realms of normal guidance here, we need specialist input. Architects can contribute to that to a certain degree, but it'll be the fire engineers that actually give that specialist input, etc. And then it also leads into other aspects of mechanical design, CFD, etc. But that stage will then potentially moves into stage 3 and develops throughout.
Excellent.
I think the critical thing here is identify, not necessarily to come up with the answers, but to identify what are those critical bits of information that are needed. And what I'm hearing is, yes, what I think we need to identify is the decision tree of why vents were there, what's the reasoning and what was the which part of the building regs have been applied to. And if we just I'm conscious, I just want to keep moving it forward, and we also need to understand, as Bill said, somewhere needs to be recorded the competence of the people making those decisions. So if we follow into box D13, so we're inside ADB, we're not going down a fire engineered solution for this exercise. I think that was that you, Jim, suggesting that. So we're okay. We're in a ADB solution now. If we take an end of corridor vent in an ADB solution, then ADB says it needs to provide 1.5 square meters of free area. So that's quite prescriptive. I guess the question we need to ask ourselves now is what needs to be captured here, and why.
What does ADB mean?
Approved document B. Sorry, George. Approved document B.
Yeah. Okay.
So the building regs, the fire element of the building regs.
Cool. Okay.
Do we need to be that prescriptive about it? It just needs to be recorded.
This is a really interesting thing, Bill, because if it's not detailed sufficient, it just does need to be recorded, but it's understanding the implications of it that potentially lead astray. Okay, so from an experience point of view, invariably, if this isn't detailed sufficiently well, it's ADB, so it's straightforward. Well, how that 1.5 meters is calculated is not clear in ADB, and what that leads to is the aperture being too small, and then therefore you've got a non-compliance at much too far down the line. So what I'm trying to, from a manufacturer's point of view, what I would be looking for is clear information about sizes in the fire strategy.
I've seen many a time an architect struggle in later stages of the project and getting into detailed design and achieving the areas he needs because his windows aren't big enough that it's designed, I've seen
Happens
it
all the time. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Well, for my benefit, could you just explain that in a little bit more detail, because it sounds really important.
Okay. There. Okay. So approved document B, ADB, in the application we're talking about says you need to provide an AOV at the end of corridor with 1.5 square meters of free area. And it doesn't
What does free area mean? Sorry.
Exactly. Great question, because that's really the nub of one of the issues here. The free area used to be able to be measured in various ways, nothing really written down. But then we have a harmonized product standard, EN 12101 Part 2. And that product standard doesn't allow you to state the free area in the essential characteristics. It asks you to you have to declare what's called the aerodynamic free area, which is a function of the height, the width, the angle of opening, and then effectively it's put through a wind tunnel, and you come up with a curve, your flow coefficient, which you then apply to your height, width, and angle of opening, and that will give you an output, as I showed there. So you've got the width, the height, the internal throat, and then you apply your coefficient, which gives you your aerodynamic free area in square meters.
Yeah. Is aerodynamic free area specified as such in the approved document B?
No, it isn't.
Area, doesn't it?
It's just free area. So what the industry, what our trade industry, the Smoke Control Association have done, they've published guidance and said ADB requires 1.5, but as an industry, we suggest this equates to 0.9 of an aerodynamic free area, which means you can then install a fully certified product to meet that. And this is one of those little grey areas, because this is fundamental to the overall performance system. Because if the height and width might achieve your 1.5, but if you only open the vent 100 mil, then there's no way. So the common denominator is actually to use the product which is tested to a harmonized. Does that help, George?
Yes.
If I could just jump in, sorry, ADB approved document B does define free area of smoke ventilators at the back with a diagram, and that says that the declared aerodynamic free areas in accordance with the British standard 12101-2, and the unobstructed cross-sectional area, geometric free area measured in the plane where the area is at minimum. And there's a diagram there. So
correct, but and you're absolutely right. And just to finish that point off, the aerodynamic free area is not, you can't calculate that on site. That has to be put through a wind tunnel, and that is declared as one of the essential characteristics.
Yeah, understood.
Okay, but what ADB doesn't do, it doesn't explain that 1.5 of geometric free area equates to 0.9 aerodynamic. That's the little bit that's missing in ADB. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, so what all the Smoke Control Association did is finish that link.
Yeah. No, and I think that's essential information missing from ADB.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess part of this exercise is we know we're not dealing with a perfect situation of information out there, especially in the regulations, which is why we have to supplement that with additional requirements. And this is the beauty of this exercise, because that is a critical piece of information for the successful operation of that product in application.
Does that value change depending on any other criteria, such as the space that it is protecting? Or is it always going to be 0.9 or 1.5?
Great question. It is declared as a product that's come out of a factory. Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't change according to the space it's sitting in. However, for instance, end of corridor, if that's sitting in a very deep reveal, okay, so this is where the spatial coordination comes in. If that's sitting in a very deep reveal, then it might not be able to achieve the free area that's declared.
Why not?
Because when the vent is open, the free sides, so the rectangle at the top and the triangles at the side, for instance, effectively are blocked in by this reveal.
Got it. Okay.
So that's where the spatial coordination is critical to understand, because it will have a direct impact on the performance of the product.
Because that's where just having a look, just following on from approved document B, and then it references the other one, 12101-2.
Yep.
And it talks about effectiveness of smoke and hot gas extraction. God, that's it right. And it's aerodynamic free area, and it talks about things like it should be larger than 0 square meters, which is funny. Wind deflectors, adding that. So basically, this part talks about when it's installed, it must meet the requirement. I'm just having a look to see if it's got it says it's Annex B. See, it's actually got a number, which I don't know if it has. So it just says should be larger than 0 square meters. That's helpful. The aerodynamic free area should let more air out than 0.
Where are you reading
That's
that
not
from?
on XP, you say?
This is in BSEN 12101-2.
Yeah, and that's the point, because it's any application. The product standard is for any application. We're talking about a specific, and that goes back to the point that ADB says we want 1.5, and the Smoke Control Association has said, okay, in our experience that equates to 0.9 aerodynamic free area. But I guess the going back to the exercise here is it's that data that's I believe is critical to be documented as early on in the process as possible, because it's going to reduce the risk of error, but from an operator point of view, at least you've got half an idea of what the product was designed to achieve.
Yeah, what I'm thinking here, Bill, is what we want to know is which of this information needs to be computer readable, and how would it be actioned. Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do is make sure that, if, for example, 0.9 or 1.5 or whatever is the value that would need to be tested against, what is the function in the Revit application, for example, that would be doing that? And that's why I was asking if there's a relationship between the spacers and the and I think the point that Mo was making earlier, and that is that if for example this is principally around the common areas, if that's the case, then what I think we'd want to do is say, is there something as an attribute that we need to add to the space definitions of common areas that would then be something that could be used to calculate and verify whether that particular thing is. So, the thing you were talking about, a deep reveal, could you just explain what you mean by that? Because I'm sorry, my ignorance.
Let me, hang on. Let me see if I can get this. 1 second. I've just put a picture in the chat.
Oh, good.
That's from approved document B. So this is when you're using the geometric method.
Yes.
So know what the free area is. And you can see the top dotted line there is coming from the inside of the reveal of the building. So if you put a deep reveal in the building, it's going to reduce that geometric opening.
I'm with you. So that's a function of that would be something that the architect presumably would want to be testing.
They'd have to take it into consideration when you're designing your structure.
I suspect what would happen is you would have the architect would go by this, because generally the architects do a little bit of engineering, but they're more about the designing of the actual building itself. And then the engineer would look at that from a slightly later stage, and this is where the argument between the architect and the engineer happens, about whether or not that fully complies to actually aerodynamic free area. So I suspect that's probably what would happen with that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Does anyone have experience in that?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
What I would say though is that you could you could introduce, and sorry, my BIM expertise is not up there, or Revit, but you could introduce parameters that means that when you insert an AOV instead of a window, that actually tells you that it's compliant to the size to produce that free area required. Yeah. That then means that as soon as that's chucked in, your structural openings are correct. You know that you're achieving that, and that's it. For me, that's how it should work. Also, but from my understanding is then there's other limitations that come in. So if you've got a single window design, that the push arm actuator to push it out, etc. may not be man enough, as it were, to activate a single window. So therefore, that then turns into two windows or double openers. It's that sort of thing that I think Revit should be flagging up, that there's a non-compliance, because it means then that even our IBA stage 2, and sorry, I'm going to waffle for a bit now, it means that the drawings aren't submitted at that stage. So where it's concept, it's purely sort of exchange between client, architect, and someone said, you know what the design is going to look like. The layouts are obviously critical for achieving space requirements. So it's then that at that point it is just identifying space. So if that can be linked to a corridor and then also be linked to you know, performance requirements as such, then you know that you're achieving that on an AOV. But the thing missing there is knowing that an AOV is required, and if that gets missed, then it no doubt it will get picked up in the later stages. But for me, that's then, when does a fire engineer become involved? So you know, if you're looking at concept design, should fire engineers be in there at that point, or consultation with building regs, etc.?
I think anybody saying, I think that idea it will be picked up at later stages is something that's what this is about, saying it's got to be flagged up now, so it will be flagged up at later stage, because it's I think that's, yeah, that hope.
So maybe that is at REBA stage 1 preparation briefing, you have a fire safety officer or something like that who decides that based on the brief of this building, we're going to need this fire equipment. So maybe that is decided at REBA stage 1 as a not exactly what, but it's going to be 6 stories plus. We're going to need an AOV system.
Sorry, Bill.
I wonder. I just think what one needs to put in place is the fact that it needs to be done and proven. I don't know when that. If you haven't got a building yet, it's difficult to do that.
Isn't the part of the Gateway 1 of the fire safety bill? Doesn't Gateway 1 require a fire strategy that needs to be signed off before you can move to Gateway 2?
Yeah, when is Gateway 1? Remind me.
I think it's effectively REBA stage 3. But in fairness, I took that off a REBA document I found online.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you've got a building, you need a way of dealing with it. And I don't know when you're going to get a building. You might not have it at 1, if you see what I mean. You might only have it at the end of 2. Just referring back to that other thing about the reveals, and how that could be. I was wondering if the Revit element should include the window reveals. And so that so that you do it, because that free area aspect.
The Revit model needs to include wall thicknesses, which in turn will give you the reveals. Clearly, you need to know your window profiles as well to be able to work out that full reveal.
Yeah.
Going back to a comment that was mentioned before about checking, I don't believe Revit checks itself, but there are applications out there that you can write rules into. So the one that came across the past, I think, was Celebri, where you can write rules into it for it to check. So you plug you run your Revit model through another piece of software, and it'll check whatever you tell it to check. So,
you can also do it within Revit. You can run things like Dynamo.
Okay. You know, we do use Dynamo. I didn't realize that could check. Okay.
I think it can. You know, I'm not sure, to be honest, but
it's an add-on. It's an add-on, ultimately, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's free, but it's something that, you know, most architects now are using Dynamo to, you know, enhance the way in which they do things in Revit. Yeah, we used it to extract all of the information out of the model at the end. the architect would be best speaking to about that rather than me.
I think what I'm hearing is okay. One of the outputs from this is I don't think we can find a reason why that detailed information about sizes, spatial coordination with wall thicknesses, reveals, free areas. To me, that seems to be fairly fundamental to be captured as early in the process as possible, in the design process before we even think about putting it out to tender.
Makes sense to me. Does anybody object to that?
No.
Good.
And given Gateway 1, I believe there's going to be somebody responsible for the fire strategy, hopefully a qualified fire engineer, but somebody responsible for the fire strategy before it can pass, okay, with the building safety bill from Gateway 1 to Gateway 2. So that kind of hangs together with needing to put the information in there. That's part of the safety case, and that allows you to progress. Let me just go down the questions we've got. So if it is required, what's the relevant compliance framework? In this instance, we've talked about ADB, the Construction Products Regulation, and backed up by the Smoke Control Association guidance. What is the relevant performance criteria? Well, in this particular product, the most important thing is the free area, because that's what the design requirement is. So that's we've already kind of covered that off. And then moving across in terms of, okay, we put a specification. It's got through the it's got sign off to proceed from Gateway 1 to Gateway 2. So now we're getting into the real technical design, which is the fire safety specification. So now we're talking about the interaction of the product, not only with its surround, but also the system that sits behind it. And I guess one of the questions is, what do we feel the data is that needs to be identified in the specification at this point? I've got lots of thoughts on it, but it's probably safer for me to open the table first of all. Okay.
I'm not too sure about this bit myself.
That's fine. Okay, so we've got a product. Hopefully we've defined the size of that product, but now we've got to make sure that that product works, because just specifying the product on its own is insufficient. So part of that information trail, and especially the golden thread, is how the product's going to operate and when it's going to operate. So how there's got to be some kind of control system. There's got to some kind of triggering system for detectors or override. How's it got to be wired? Has it got to be fire rated cabling? Is there a primary and secondary supply? Has it got battery backup? All of these, we're now into a system specification, which I believe is fundamental to go into the fire safety specification. So any organization proposing a system can satisfy the client or the specification. They've got something to actually demonstrate compliance against.
Okay, so this would also include when you start looking at the engineering part of it and you go, okay, we now have it installed in the building in theory. We now need to check that the AOV works, the free or the aerodynamic free area works based on the fact that the wind in that building is going to be hitting it at this angle at this speed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense. It's some more detail, but I don't know what we record. This is a bit I'm not sure about what we record for the golden thread purposes. Whether or not we're recording, we've carried out these checks as part of ISO X standard or these specific standards. Have we carried out the checks?
If we were to look at if you look at how sort of design and build project is addressed, you have a set of employers' requirements, and you get a set of contractors' proposals. which is supposed to be a very detailed document telling us exactly how they're going to achieve the employer's requirements, but it rarely comes through as that. If you looked at it in the same way, we have a performance specification, if you like, from the client. We would have our fire strategy for the building. So, is it a stay put strategy, etc.? Do we want sprinklers? What's our strategy as a client? And given those requirements, would it not be up to then for an M&E consultant to list out how they've responded to our requirements? In a sense, the contractor's proposals, the designer's proposals as to how they are going to meet our requirements for the building. Mm-hmm. That then provides a formal document in terms of a response to the requirements as to how they're going to execute the requirements. Which is the rest.
I'm out of my depth because I haven't seen those documents. Typically, James, what kind of granular detail do they go down to? Because I'm thinking about that golden thread and the type of detail that Grenfell are going through to say that free area wasn't met.
So the question is then, what detail does that response from the consultant go into?
Yeah.
I mean that would I don't think I can answer that immediately now. That would need to be defined as to what format that looked like. I mean, is there a pro forma that they have to fill in that they've got to answer these certain questions? Maybe that would be a way to go with it. So it's almost like a long questionnaire of questions with they've got to provide answers to.
Yeah. And that's part of this discussion, isn't it? Is identifying where there's some big gaps and hopefully identifying critical bits of data that actually, however granular and nuts and bolts, are actually critical to the overall performance and as a building operator gives you the peace of mind that yes, actually, right down to the nitty gritty, that product is fit for purpose, third party certified, and you know what, it's going to work when it needs to.
I think one of the important things here is the fact that certainly what we want to try and do is establish these as standard procedures or checklists and things like that, because I think just saying that you've got to have a competent fire engineer is something that is I think a bit challenging, really, because if you ask probably 2 or 3 different fire engineers, they might have a different view based on their experience in the context. Mm-hmm. This isn't about sort of risk transfer, because that's the problem that I think we have as an industry, where we're saying, okay, that person is a competent person, therefore we'll try and transfer all the risk onto them. Whereas actually, if there's a checklist to work through, I'm not trying to simplify it. You still need the human experience to probably take that in context, but they must have some sort of methodology that they would use to do that type of checking. So I think that what we might do is see if we can turn that, if we can ask those questions, because if we're starting to move towards situations where we're using AI and things like that to simplify some of these processes, if you've got those sort of things set down, what is it as a fire expert? What would you need to know about this particular system that we need to document? Sorry if that was a bit rambling.
Mm-hmm. George, you're absolutely right, and it's, I think, again, one of the things that's coming out of here, it's narrowing it down to those essential characteristics. What are the critical elements of that product that have got to function in the application it's been deployed in to function as a fire safety product and do its job as part of the overall fire safety strategy? And that, to me, that's critical information that is actually quite straightforward to identify at design stage, and suddenly that's the golden thread hangs off that.
It's plugging that product back into the Revit model. So it's captured at that point. So when procurement happens, so you could have specification, procurement happens, and then a different product comes along. Mm-hmm. So once an agreed product is in place, if you plug it back into the model, then in some way, then that golden thread is linking that at that stage as it runs through. So.
Mm-hmm. 100%, and that's going back to that the way European harmonized product standards work is they all have these declarations of performance, these essential characteristics, which means products are interchangeable, because you all you're looking at is what those critical product characteristics are. So and sorry, Luke.
I was just going to say, sorry, procurement there that is a factor then as well, because when you're at the design stage, RIB4, that's still technical design. So there can be a massive, a crossover on a number of products. Yeah, if you see what I mean, from that stage to the next, mm-hmm. and does that then all get left until sort of as built stages, or as it's installed, to be back coordinated, as it were, into the design, or is it for contractors, etc., to be more upfront on the products that they're going to be using? So for specifications in there, that's what they're using. Then they're not searching for alternative products, etc. Mm-hmm.
This is, I think, you leave it to as built, it's too late, because if there's a problem, you've built the thing. I think they've got to propose stuff as they go, and it's got to go through an approval process.
Yeah, sorry, my point was.
Sorry, go on.
My point was plugging it back into Revit. Sorry. So yeah, I could completely agree with what you're saying there. It's at what point does the product? So the product could be still agreed at RIB at stage 4, but the architect has specified a different product. If you see what I mean. So it's their construction issue drawings at those points through tender prelim drawings being agreed. So for me, there's something there that
see that's exactly it, isn't it? Because I've actually, there's been I think Johnny might have told a few people on this, but there was a story of a pipe that we had that was defined a certain way, and it was defined to be a certain thermal resistance, and at some point between concept and design and build, it was changed, and the product was switched to a different one for whatever reason, but that wasn't recorded. And then when they actually went to use it and test it, it ended up bursting the pipe because it wasn't suitable, basically. It had to all be ripped up, all the concrete and everything had to be ripped up and redone. So yeah, I think you're right. It's about picking that product that was designed or was picked for this situation and making sure that that is inserted in, and any product that might take the place of that matches the criteria exactly and is defined why it was changed to a different one.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just put this in the context of what we're doing with the housing, the hacked housing asset data group, because we've actually got an automatic opening vent actually defined in that. I think it might be useful just to show you what currently the information is that we're asking for, and how I think it is. We need to flesh it out. Okay, is that okay?
Yeah, please carry on, George.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know how familiar people are with Kobe, but let me just make this a bit smaller. So what we've got here is, this is a Kobe workbook, okay, but it's designed around the asset types. There are 249 standard asset types that have been identified within the hacked working group, And you'll see that on row 19, we've got automatic opening vents. Okay. Now, the way COBie is structured, you have standard information that you would expect to find against any type of product, whether it's an automatic opening vent, a door, an access hatch, or whatever, right? And they are along the top here. So they are things like description, model number, manufacturer, warranty information, expected life, duration, etc. Okay, and there are physical things like nominal height, nominal weight, etc., and material and things like that. Okay, so these are what are commonly known as common COBie attributes. And I've just also put up onto the chat the MBS data sheet or data requirements, the MBS from the MBS toolkit for AOVs. And that again is only using the standard COBie requirements. Okay. What we've then got is something called component, which is actually the instance of each of those items. So this is the information that you'd actually want. The first one is to say that this is the information we want for the automatic opening vent. And then there are 50 of them on this. And therefore we want to know where it is, the space. And we also want to know the serial number, installation date, warranty start, and barcode and things like that. Okay, so this is designed around the standard asset information requirements. Now, the things that are not standard, they're held under something else called attribute, right? Now, attribute in here, you can put whatever information you want in here. So what we could do is we could say, right, we actually want that aerodynamic free space, free area as a value, right? And that could be added as an attribute here. Currently, on the work that is now being peer reviewed, the only value that we've got against automatic opening vents is fire rating, right? Now, there are many other attributes that have been defined. If I should need to clear that, select all. So you've got access width and things like this, airflow. So what are the parameters that we might want to have against an automatic opening vent that we can put in? So this is the way, this is how this information would be held in the Revit family, by the way. This comes in as an attribute, as what's called a shared parameter on the object. So I thought that might be useful just to explain it.
Are you able to share that, or is it published yet on the Hacked site?
It isn't published yet. No, we're still we're getting close, and we can certainly make it available to you. If sorry, was it, who asked that question?
Sorry, Luke.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. We can certainly. What we're doing.
Because I was originally in that, but I didn't. I went for a period where I didn't have time to dedicate to it, unfortunately.
Yeah, what's now happening, Luke, is that we're going to be putting it up onto the Active Plan BRE site, where you're going to be able to. We're going to make that available to you and James and others, whoever wants to look at it, and make their suggestions in terms of what additional attributes are needed. So yes, it will be
because this basically I tried to go through that task with myself actually, and that's where I funny, isn't it? Funny, I literally went through it myself, and I said, and this is the issue I run into when it comes to handover and when it comes to operational. If you ask people in operational teams, what do you need to maintain, they will go, give me everything, but actually they have no clue what they need.
Definitely, and that's why we need to be very. I mean, it is important to say, because this is something we've the hacked working group.
Yeah.
What we want, because of the way technology works, we don't need to. Sibsy, for example, the way in which they've put together their data templates, they've done a lot of work to make sure that only the attributes that are really needed are done. But the result of that is it's taken them years to do it, and also they haven't really captured everything that's needed, because everybody's having to justify why they want that particular value. Whereas the hacked working group, we basically said everybody can just ask for whatever they want, and we'll put it in, and then it can be up to the software applications to filter out the information that isn't needed by that particular stakeholder. Because if one person needs it, then it doesn't matter, it should go in.
Because this is what I ended up doing. And I was going, right, these are like your common attributes that I would expect on every component type using systems and products uniclass.
Good.
And then I have
excellent.
So I had like default values for something on there. Where is it? It's non-common attributes. So I started going, okay, you've got a gas council number, you've got a capacity, a max capacity, a capacity measurement, phone line supplier, phone line number, control center, grade of system, and then your grade of systems and stuff would be lists of values, because it makes more sense to just restrict those and go categories, and grade of system is A, C, D1, D2, fire alarm stuff. And then started going on. So a gas council number would be relevant to any domestic gas products and stuff like that. So I started defining what products would require that information. So it's funny that, and this is, I ended up doing this myself, but struggled to get anywhere and any help from my operational teams, because they don't know what they need to record, because they've never done it that way.
Mm-hmm.
The teams, the operational teams, and I think this is industry wide at the moment. What kind of happens is you develop a building and it's designed however it's designed. It gets to handover process and there's just this big void. So you suddenly have all this work was put into designing it, and then it goes to handover to operational teams, and you'll get the bit that gets passed across is there's a fire alarm in that building, and that's it. And then what happens is the operational teams are maintaining it as if there's a fire alarm, and that's all they're doing. They're not maintaining it as per the operation and maintenance manual, because that never really crossed over, and they're not maintaining it as per the requirements for that very specific system. So then you have the issue of, if you're not using the installer or supplier, so for example SE Controls, we've got a representative here, if you're not using SE Controls to maintain an SE Controls system, what happens is the company goes out and they go, well, we've been out and it doesn't seem to be working. But the reason they're saying that is because they don't have, for example, one of the key documents, the cause and effect document, to know how it is meant to work. They're going based on a standard system, whereas it's probably an engineered system.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
sorry.
I'm trying to get to a point where I can start looking. So if you can share that, it'd be great, because I'm trying to get to a point where I can put an argument together to start recording this data for existing stuff, and going out and collecting this data for existing buildings, and that would really, really help with rather than me trying to put together a list.
Yeah, Luke, definitely, without doubt. And in fact, actually, Johnny and his new Golden Thread team, he got 4 people on the call the other day. So yes, definitely, you're in.
Thank you. Because I also went through and matched up the systems that I put together, the list of filtered systems that matter to M&E, the building services in our team, and I ended up with 76 systems. And I think Johnny's used this in the thing, but I also matched up those systems to CIBSE Guide M for expected life.
Excellent.
Because there's an expected life for all of those systems. So I've gone through and I've literally gone, okay, well, what's an audio intercom system? Okay, well, that's this one, 10 years.
The bigger.
Have you mapped? Sorry, could I just ask, Luke, just on that, have you mapped against those systems what asset types are likely to be part of those systems?
What, the products?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So you could pick let's say a low temperature hot water system, and it would then alert you to the asset types that are likely to be part of the low temperature hot water system.
Well, that's something I did myself, and I think that was passed around a while ago, because I did that a long time ago, where I was like, I needed a surveying tool, and the surveying tool doesn't exist at the moment. So I literally said, okay, well, I'll put one together on Excel and I'll go out and survey the building myself. And I ended up with, let me just share it again. I ended up with this. So there's a whole document on how I use this as well, how I record the floor rooms using ISO standards. And then you have your system and your product. And the key point with this is I put together a list and I went, okay, fire alarm, fire detection and alarm systems. There you go, changed code. It changes the expected life as well based on the system. And if I go here, I've got what I would expect to find. Not all of that, but I would expect to find some of this in here in the fire alarm and detection system. And it might not be fully correct because I've done this from speaking to engineers and my own personal knowledge of things. So like, what would I expect to find in a low temperature hot water system, heating system? Things like chemical dosing pots and gas detectors, and it's all part of the same. Well, maybe you can argue they're not necessarily part of the same system, but they are in the same place.
I think that's excellent.
And then the CIBSE Guide where this expected life with where it came from in that list, so the code.
Excellent.
James, did you want to say something?
Sorry.
First, I think that's an excellent piece of work in terms of that what you've done there, Luke. I mean, we'd gone down a sort of a similar route with our trial project, but to be frank, in a lot less detail. A lot of you on the call already know what we did on our trial project in terms of our first stab at BIM, and we started off by looking, okay, what is our current asset management database recording, and our focus, our trial was to make that work. It wasn't looking about what we should have and what we need to have, and obviously over the past few years it's become a lot bigger issue. But what we did do is manage to get the information into a BIM model that we wanted in our current asset management database, and we managed to successfully extract it out and get it automatically uploaded into our asset management database. So a scheme with 189 units, we've got over 500,000 data points of information which are now in our asset management database. So we've worked out how to do it. We're now at the stage of, okay, so when we do our next one, when we start doing this properly, what detail do we need? Which is exactly where everybody's, including yourself, Luke, are now looking as to what's the future. The bigger headache we've got now is what on earth do we do with 500,000 pieces of information, and how on earth do we keep it up to date? Because
which
if
is
we don't
exactly
keep it up to date, that's the nightmare. Yeah.
Which is the issue I'm having on ours. I mean, mine isn't even 500,000. I went out to one site. That site that I said on there, it's one of our sites, Crisp Street. And I went out, and on our current asset management system, Keystone, we have very basic information about there's a fire alarm system there, but we won't have any detail on that system at all. It's stored in that system, and Keystone can't store that. We have about 13 or 14 systems, as we call them, in Keystone for this site. Yet when I went out, I recorded 377 products that relate to different types of systems. And in fact, I didn't even record this fully, because what I did is I went, when I'm in part of the lighting system, when I'm in the basement floor, room number 2, I have a lighting system, and there I have surface luminaires, combined emergency lights, and a self-contained, and I have 3 of the first type, 4 of the second type, and 1 of the third. So I think, did I put emergency escape light? Yeah, so one of them is the self-contained, the emergency escape light. So it's actually more assets than's even recorded on this, if I was to add in a number of items as well. And I was able to actually use this same sheet to do it remotely as well, and just work off schematics and certificates and commissioning certificates and stuff like that, and pull that detail out. But that's the sort of thing that a system needs to be in place to do that. That's where the issue is. There's no.
But you almost need a system in place to update the information before you actually implement getting the information on new schemes or in existing schemes.
Yeah.
If you go and do that as a one-off, so all this work we're doing is fantastic and it's needed, but without the second part of it, in terms of how we keep this stuff up to date, it becomes pointless as soon as it goes and does something to the building that we don't have a record of.
Going back to Kobe that George mentioned, I was speaking to one of my colleagues yesterday about that, and George, you might be able to help me out here, but from what you're saying, you would be able to link components, assets, etc., to a zone, and that zone can actually be, an individual space or the entire building as such. So all of those documents would be linked in one. Is that something that could be done there? And then also Uniclass can then be linked to that as well. So therefore you get your specifications just through that single code document.
About that as well. It's all the data side of it's all solvable. It's people how people act and react and do stuff, which is going to be for us more difficult to control. When you get someone to go and fix something in the building, how do you know that they actually install what they're supposed to install, or they've just picked the part on their van that'll actually work and do the job?
And then it was designed in a specific way, and when they've replaced it, how now that's been replaced, whether or not that is the way it was meant to be replaced. Where do you record we have changed that? Now the O&M might not be the same, and the actual performance of the building might be different. All of these different things, and none of that documentation gets updated. So what you find with all of the old stock, all the old buildings that are out there, is the stuff that was installed is probably not even close to what's in them now. But the documentation that if you went, we need all the compliance documentation, someone would go back and they would find the cause and effects and the commissioning certificates and the design drawings and stuff like that from how it was originally built. Someone would take those to site and go, well, where's this? This isn't even in here. You pulled this out completely. Where's the record of that?
Recording those things that change is one thing, but getting the people that go out there to do it to tell you, that's a whole other challenge in itself.
And what we're talking, this is brilliant stuff, and we need to carry on the discussion. I'm conscious it's 11 o'clock, so we probably all need a 10-minute break. But if we can pick this up going through the Reba stages, because what's critical here is to make you guys as operators make your lives easier. The templates have got to be almost constructed stage and then populated, because then if we can consider that critical information that needs to be updated when a change is made, when a component is changed, then we've got half a chance. So can I suggest we have a 10-minute break and pick it up when in 10 minutes?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I got myself one of those Udis that have been advertised. They're like a giant blanket jumper thing, and they are. I live in a. We purchased a Victorian terrace house in February, and we exchanged then, and it's a Victorian terrace house, so there is no insulation anywhere, and under the floors is just a big cavity that lets air through because it's meant to flow. So you can turn the heating on. You can have the heating on all day if you want, and you'll get it to a warm temperature, like I still have to wear a jumper around the house temperature. So we decided we just get these things.
Oh, brilliant!
It's just a giant, absolutely giant blanket thing, and they are awesome. So lovely and warm.
Are there pockets in there like a pouch for putting hot water bottles and things?
Well, it has a pouch there.
It does.
Yeah, it has one of the it has a massive pouch, but it's quite low. Basically, if I'm standing, it goes down, and I'm 5'11", so I'm like average height. And then my arms, it makes them like massive. My armpits up here, and that's got down there. That's the joy.
Where did you get that from?
These nice cuffs, so it doesn't get in the way.
Exactly.
Luke, where did you get those from?
It was one of those Udis. They're called OODIE.
Oh.
I needed something because I ended up walking around. I've been walking around the house with like a blanket on me, like wrapped around my shoulders where I'm cold.
Yeah.
It's great.
The other side of working from home, isn't it?
Mm. Well, that's because that's the other thing. I'm not going to have the heating on all day for me sitting in 1 or 2 rooms in the house.
No, absolutely.
What's the point in heating up a 3-bedroom Victorian terrace fully for me to sit in 1 room?
Have you got TRVs in each room, or have you?
No.
Oh, really? So it's one on, all on.
It's we don't even have at the moment, because we haven't got round to the heating controlled part of the house, updating that. We're sorting out the loft insulation first.
Yeah.
But we don't even have a thermostat. We have a button. The boiler is on or it's off. Not that a thermostat would be that useful in this situation.
Well, like you say, you've got to get the insulation sorted first. Otherwise, you're just heating your neighbours' houses and the and the sky.
Yeah, heating the sky. That's the one. Yeah. So in the meantime, a giant blanket that I can wear, a wearable blanket. There's a problem with a blanket is you wrap a blanket around your shoulders up here and you have it like round the top, a bit like a poncho almost, but then it gets in the way of you using your arm because you're now pushing your arm through it, so you're putting the blanket off.
I respect your confidence for keeping the camera on anyway. Fair play.
Nah, I don't mind. I don't mind. It's all gone out the window, isn't it? Working from home now.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be. Your meeting shouldn't be based on your appearance. They should be based on your contribution and your knowledge.
Just as well.
I actually did carry out interviews recently. I interviewed a few people. And during the interviews, I was like, yeah, I should probably dress smart. So I did a shirt, a jacket, a tie on the top half. Then the bottom half was pajamas and slippers. So that felt really weird.
I'm sure. Especially when you got up and walked around.
Yeah. I made sure to, I like, if I get up, the camera has to turn off before I move. Yeah, I did make sure to have that in mind.
Mo's just sending a message in. We'll give it a minute or so, and then we'll. I think we'll crash on again. Right, Mo's just sharing an image. Yes.
I just thought it'd be worth. I know we're sort of backtracking a little bit now, but it's just sharing what's in approved document B for where an AOV is required. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that because getting back to the architect should know, etc. They should, looking at this diagram, it's fairly easy and simple to follow. Most of our travel distances are over 4.5 meters. Most of the buildings that you would do don't just have 2 flats off of a core. So it is fairly easy to follow and establish when an AOV is required there.
Agreed.
Just before we kick off, could I ask everybody just to switch on their cameras for a moment? I'd like to just get a group sort of photo, if that's all right.
Of course.
Hold on to
with Udi.
With my hood as well.
Absolutely.
Got my cultist hood that comes with it.
My connection might die out, but I will give it a go.
Udi with free cultist hood.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. In fact, I should put mine on as well. I've been asked. Yeah. That's a bit crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Hang on a second. Bear with me. I'll just come back to it. Switch my camera on as well. B. So let me just cut it again.
There you go, on together mode. I think this is weird, the together mode. Has anyone tried that?
No, what's that?
So now that everyone's got the camera on, if you press the 3 dots on Teams, more actions, and then you've got gallery, large gallery, and together mode, if you have it. If you click together mode, it puts you essentially all in a seminar room together.
Oh, right, okay.
So it cuts out your backgrounds and it puts you in a seminar room together.
Excellent. I've learned something today already.
You can see a lot more people when you do it this way. It lets you put more people on the screen if you've got big meetings.
Does it? So does it scale the seminar room?
It's bigger, yeah. It'll include more seats.
Oh, there's different scenes. You can change the scene.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, and it's got the number of people based on the scene that you select.
George, have you processed? Have you done it?
Excellent.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I've got it. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, nice. Very good.
How did you change the scene?
Right. So in the when on the actual screen that you see in the bottom left, there's a little change scene button with a pen.
I don't think I've got that.
Yeah, I can't see that anyway.
No,
Yeah, never mind.
I'll show you. I'll show you on mine. I don't know how this will work if I'm sharing screenception, I guess. So here, you see yourself. I've got down here. I've got a little change scene button.
Okay.
Oh yes, yeah.
Click that. I've got like different scenes. We can all sit outside.
Brilliant.
And they've all got numbers, haven't they? United Nations space something.
Fantastic.
Well done.
Yeah.
How do we get this implemented within BIM and Revit?
Good.
Right.
I was just going to, just before we move on, I was just going to answer a couple of questions that were raised earlier, if I may.
Yeah.
About, I think James, it might have been James or Mo asked, but yeah, the way we've got this organized, let me just get to the right. Yeah, so somebody was asking about how you organize things in Kobe as far as units are concerned. I think it was Mo that asked.
Yeah.
If I just explain, can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
The way Kobe works, and if you please forgive me, but basically you work from the left to the right. So you'll see here we've got facility, which is typically a block, yeah, in housing association terms. You've then got a floor, you've then got spaces. So these are the spaces that we've got as our standard that we developed with Peabody. So you've got standard space types there, and the attributes that we'd expect to find about a space height, which is, you know, usable height, gross area, net area, whatever. Okay. You've then got something called zones. Now we've used that to group together a dwelling. So in other words, a unit we've got defined in that. And I'll come on in a moment, just show you how we've used that on a live project.
So you're going, there's a kitchen, there's a dining room, or there's 7 kitchens, there's 7 dining rooms in this building, but kitchen 1 and dining room 1 are in zone 1, which is flat 1.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's cool.
Yeah, so it's a grouping of spaces. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can also have a grouping for a complete floor, or you can have a grouping for a collection of spaces which may not be geographically adjacent.
Could you do the whole build? Could you do the whole building, George, as well there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, basically, you've got the whole building.
Floors, wouldn't it? So you have your facility as your building, the physical full structure, and then you could have zones as core A and core B, for example.
When we used it on our trial project, we scrapped floor and replaced it with core instead, because when you're talking about flats and accommodation, core was far more useful and beneficial to us than floor levels. So that was just our take on it when we did it.
I would suggest that you don't change the Kobe format, just work around it. So in other words, leave floor in, but to do what you're just saying there, James, you can do that in zone, because you can then group together all of the spaces that are contextually relevant to a core, for example.
Can you zone together zones?
Yeah.
So if you put your spaces in a flat and then zone them into a flat, you can then combine those flats into a.
It's essentially, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's just ways of setting that up. So if I mean, I'm very happy to talk you through the way we're doing this, and also it would answer some of the questions that Luke was talking about earlier as to what do you do when you change things? How do you record that something has been changed for something else? So that's something else that we're doing a lot of work on at the moment, that whole change management piece. And then I've got
sorry to speak awkward. Can you so we said we can put group zones into another zone. Can you then group those into a further zone? Presumably you can.
I think your only limitation will be your IT solution.
The reason I asked that is that led by our finance team, our new asset structure is facility to estate down to facility. Then we've got core, then subcore, then lettable unit, because of the way that buildings tend to be split up. So we might have bed sits, you see, within a larger unit, which is then off the main core of a building. So they introduced this, and they need that for the service charges and understanding where M&E is situated. Is it in the lettable unit? Is it in the actual flat itself? Is it in the core? So that's the way they had to do it. So it added another level that we weren't expecting when we set off to do it. So following this seems to work, but it would need 3 levels of zones. That's the only thing I was thinking.
Yeah, let's perhaps pick that up offline, but certainly yes, that can be done.
I mean,
I'll just
George, is it worth us walking through what we're talking about, which is an AOV, in this context? Because the information we're talking about, the critical information that we needs to be generated and captured. Would anybody expect to see this at construction, at construction period, or is this post construction?
Oh no, this is very much construction. This is the data you need to collect through construction, and there's data drop points all the way through construction when certain things need to be gained from your design team and your contractor to be checked.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, actually, it's pre-construction as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
okay. So can we walk through the model of an AOV? Work through the data capture of an AOV, because we've got just an hour left, and because that's going to kind of fit in the REBA stages we're talking about.
I'm certainly happy to talk through that in the context of Kobe. I don't have an AOV in this because we reverse engineered it from an existing O&M. This is actually a real project that we did by reverse engineering the O&M information from on this Peabody project. So if I just explain how the structure works here, basically what you've got in a Kobe workbook, you've got contacts. Now, contacts are always described as email addresses. Don't go into why that's the case. That just is. So therefore, for example, SE Controls as a supplier would be in here, and in fact probably is.
Line 27.
Yeah, it is there. Yeah. So SE Controls. So the information about SE Controls, who the company name, the telephone number, and any other information that is required actually comes in at this stage here. So the purpose of this is perhaps to know where they are, so you can then also calculate their location from a point of view of traveling, etc. And we've also got down here what the unit class code is for them as well. Okay, as a manufacturer. We then go into facility. So facility is essentially the block or the tower block there. In this particular case, it's called HB 1511, and again, it automatically has got the right category against it. Yeah, unit class category. And the other information here is, for example, description, etc. So it's fairly basic. We've then got the information about what you need on a floor. And in this particular case, it's got 4 floors. And you'll see here as well, the contact here, who created it, in this particular case, we did, but that will relate back to that contact tab there. Okay. So when we, for example, test and validate this information, we're always comparing or relating information that exists elsewhere. So spacers, for example, have all got a floor, because you can't have a space that isn't on the floor. Okay, and the definition of the floors is coming from that floor tab there. The description of the floor is there, and also its height and elevation. So this is, probably you could use this to calculate the height of the building, and therefore look at it from a point of view of, I guess, fire tenders and the like. We've then got spacers. So the space reference here, we've got the floor name, we've got a description of the space, but also its ID. Okay, and those are then grouped into, in this particular case, into units. So you'll see here what we've got here. We've defined these so we can say that, you know, for example, 8 Danvers Avenue, which is this is its location here, is made up of these spaces. So you'll see there, those are the spaces. These are common delimited. Remember that this isn't something that is expected for humans to read, but this is the computer basically way of reading which spaces comprise of, you know, 8 Danvers Avenue. But in this zone, you can also have as many different ways of grouping spaces as you like. So as James was talking about earlier, being able to group them, you know, for example, the fact that you've got these spaces here, but you've also got them grouped maybe for a floor, or maybe some of the common areas may appear in both apartments and also, well, that's a bad example, but
So
you can group them together.
For the context of this, the good example is you could, in theory, group all of the common corridors together, and within the space that is the common corridor, then I'm assuming we're going to move on towards assets, and then it would list the AOV in the assets. Is that the way it's going?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And also you'll see here we've got the correct Uniclass definition for spaces as well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. You also, so I'm thinking zone. What would happen with zone is you would also group them by, for example, tenancy type. So
yes,
that would be relevant for finance and service charge. That general needs need to be split out from leaseholders. So you'd group spaces by that. The spaces thing. So there was an issue I had with spaces, and the way I got around it, there was a couple of them. Let me just read, because I wrote it all in my document. I said that I did rooms based on very, very similar, actually. I did it floor and room, and floor was always started at 0. And then room starts at 0 as well, and you go 1, 2, 3, 4 against each particular floor. Then what I did was I did subspaces within those rooms. So the idea was that you could replicate the way you surveyed this building. So the idea was you walk around clockwise and you record spaces as you go, and you go through each door clockwise and record a separate room. But then what it meant is if you're in a particular room, if you wanted to record that cupboard that's opposite you in the room, you would look clockwise around the building and go, is that the first cupboard in the room? If it was, then you would say that is. So that would be subspace. Say I'm on the ground floor. It would be 01, 02, A is the electrical entrance hall riser cupboard, for example.
What builds a new cupboard?
So that was the way I would define a cupboard, because it's not a space. It's not a room as such. So it was a way of defining a space within a room.
Yeah, certainly you could do that, or you could just call it an asset. Yeah, so the one thing I would say on that, Luke, just a real, fundamental thing, is it's never a good idea to have any value as a leading with a number, or with a 0.
Yeah, because you Excel file it and it disappears.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's always a good idea to have a letter starting with it, because then it stops that from happening. Okay.
And then I had things like if you, at a later date, if you merge and partition a room, I defined that if you merged them, you would assign the lowest current number to those rooms, and the number that was already assigned disappears, the older number. You'd have non-connected buildings, connected rooms. So ones with an external entrance that are part of the same building, they'd be recorded as rooms, but they would start as exterior, so space 0 outside the building. And then stairwells, I decided it would make sense to keep the same room number through all stairwells when you're surveying. So if that was room 3, on every floor, room 3 would be taken up by that stairwell.
Yep.
What
about
this is different? mine was more about how to survey a building and then how to replicate that survey if I went out with that survey and wanted to find out where that piece of equipment was with just this bit of paper, with just a bit of text. Whereas this is different. This you would assume would come alongside a drawing as well.
Yeah,
to show the layout.
One of the things that we're doing with PRP at the moment is developing a smart survey tool that would enable you to do, some of those things. That's definitely something that we ought to have a chat about, because I think
I'm conscious we're probably going a little bit off track here. If we can just bring it back. I mean, what we're talking through is absolutely key to the exercise this morning. If we can kind of bring it back to the specific product, it gives us a real life application.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so the AOV would be in this list here. Yeah. So if we say, we don't actually have, we might have.
So we'd have like a control unit, an actuator, maybe a backup battery, detectors or something like that. We'd have all of those as individual items that would then be part of the ventilation system. Is that right?
That's right. Bear with me a second.
You've got it there. You've got it there. Go up. You went past. It was mechanical extract, smoke extract system. There you go. Mechanical smoke extracts. There's a few of them.
Bingo. Okay. So there, what we've therefore got, this is the information in type. Yeah. So
okay, so that's your system.
No, it's not the system. The system's down here. So what we've got a type of product. This is the information that we want to see on type. So to make that a bit easier to read, let's just copy that. I'll just create a new. Just drop
that. That's interesting, Luke, because that particular product is one of ours, and that has battery backup in it, which is really quite. I know where you're coming from. That's a really valid point.
Yeah, really, there's something that doesn't necessarily get picked up, and it's something I picked up on mine. Is I was like, oh, when I surveyed, it was an SE control system I surveyed, and I'm like, oh, they've got control units. Each actuator has its own control unit.
Yeah.
And each control unit has its own battery inside.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the difficulty I found is, unless it's on the specific floor, unless I go, there's an AOV there and there's a control unit, I myself wasn't able to link up exactly what control unit matches what actuator.
100%.
Okay, so those are the attributes that are standard COBie. So manufacturer, model number, replacement cost, expected life, etc. So again, this is nothing that is specific to an AOV. Okay. So that's where we're at with that. And then you've got components, which are all the instances of that particular item. So we've got here, this is what you were asking earlier, Will. This is telling us here what which space it's in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, if we go down to
but could you filter column A? Yeah. You can see where they all are then.
Yeah, I think actually on this particular
might not have it.
You haven't got any.
Yeah, no, it's not that. It's just that we didn't have it. This was the exercise, wasn't it, that we were looking to do, Will, where we're actually going to locate them in the building.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got them as types, but we don't have them as located. But all of these items, we did have CAD plans, so we could locate where they are. So we've got what's
cool. So on type, we're recording this particular make and model of this one, and then we're saying this particular make and model is located in the communal corridor on the first floor, second floor, third floor, and roof, for example.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well,
And then-
once, am I right? Once you've got your type set though, when you're working in Revit, if that's set up as a block in Revit with all of the correct information against it, and you just insert that thing several times, it creates the components.
It does. It does. It creates.
Automatically.
Revit call them instances.
Yeah.
So that's, and then you've got systems. Yeah. So that was the point you were making earlier, Luke. So here we've got the systems that those items relate to. Yeah.
Line
so
13.
again, so
Row
we've
13.
then got
Smoke.
So we've then
Sorry.
so smoke control, and you've got it against the right system category as well.
Could you just recap on how you put something in that's not in the standard Kobe list? So, I think if
And
memory serves me right, in
do you mean additional attributes?
Yeah. So, for instance, on an item, I think Kobe lacks servicing regularity. Is it every 6 months? Is it 12 months? Is it something like that?
No, it
Is
doesn't.
that in there? I thought that was missing from Kobe.
The thing is, I think this is the issue, is Kobe's not, there's very little out there that is defining this is exactly what a Kobe is. If you read all the documents, they say, oh yeah, here, you should probably have this sort of stuff in here. But it's almost like a way of managing data rather than a data set itself, rather than so this is interesting because you've essentially put this into a Kobe based data set. Basically, you've created.
Well, that's what Kobe is. I mean, Kobe is basically a data schema. For that. So, in answer to the point you're making, James, job, you see there, that's the standard Kobe field.
Okay, so it's a job, right? Okay, yeah.
It's just that most people don't use it. Yeah,
no, we
and
didn't. Fault, failure.
There's other tabs in here that people don't use. They don't use spares, for example. Yeah. Whereas you should. They don't use documents, which is where you would put the documents in that, for example, there we've got the SE controls data sheet for that particular unit. So that comes in documents. So
I suppose that taking it on a step further now, this is critical for the product or the asset data capture through the process, and the fact that you can link various components in the building together to be the system. I think one of the questions we've got is, okay, there is a design intent for the smoke vent system to operate. What are the critical bits of information that need to be applied to each product to satisfy it's going to be fit for purpose and do what it needs to in an emergency instance? And going back to the point Luke was saying, when you send a maintenance engineer, what is the engineer actually validating?
Could I just add to that very quickly? Because I think also how are we identifying what components are golden thread items as well? So
this is probably one of the most important but least used elements of Kobe. It's called attributes, right? So you can put attributes. So let's say, for example, Mo, you wanted to say, right, this is a golden thread component, right? Or type. You'd say actually type rather than component. Yeah. You could put that in as an attribute, right?
Yeah.
And therefore anything that is then you would consider to be, like fire collars and fire dampers and smoke dampers and etc. You could say, right, these are all items or types of assets that need to be checked. and you could then put here in the jobs tab the questions that you actually want to ask. And you can also put in here, you'll see here that we've got procedures. So in this particular case, we've got safety procedures, we've got planned maintenance procedures, and we can see what is it that we're going to do every hour or every month, every year. So you can actually have that as a series of individual tasks, which can then go out into, let's say, a CAFM system. Here you've got the whether it's got to be done every week or a month. So here, sorry, that's where you've got that. You've got frequency there. Yeah.
So I feel like this might be better working with. There's a company called part of MBS actually, SFG20. It might be better working with them for this sort of thing.
No. So let me just explain the point about that, right? So SFG20, who we work, we use their data for our clients. SFG20 is the standard maintenance regime.
Okay,
right?
So this is specific to those. This is your O&M.
Exactly. So, Will, for example, he would want to make sure that to protect the warranty, he would want to ensure that his product, that people follow a certain set of procedures. Now, it might be that SFG20 covers it all, but it might not.
Okay.
And
It might be
therefore,
specific to your product, to that product. I see. I get what you mean.
And I think that's critical, because this comes all the way back to the design intent, a very specific free area calculation and interaction with the reveal, etc. It's so project specific that those attributes need to be captured. So what are the critical things that need to be tested? Well, okay, if it's sitting in a deep reveal, it's got to open all the way it was designed to. If you need to replace the actuator, you've got to make sure it opens quick enough and it opens far enough, because if you don't, then potentially it doesn't open far, it's sitting in the reveal and it'll fail.
So all of that information could be captured across emails. So golden thread, I'm just throwing it in there. It's linking that documentation, etc. That of how you've got to that agreement. Run through that design parameter. I was just Yeah, it's just a way. Is there a way of linking documentation as such within within COBE, what we're looking at in that way?
Yeah, documents there. Yeah, so
Yeah.
If for example you've got a documented procedure, you could put the document in there. Yeah, what you're also able to do, there's something called impact. So you could actually put in here, maybe this is where we could use the cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you could start to look here. We've got impact, lead-in time, duration. So in other words, what this can be used for is putting together something that is managing that. You've also got something in here called connection. So what is connected to what? So we're starting to use this to create schematics, because often you actually want to know what things are in terms of, like electrical circuits and things like that. So that's something else that, again, a lot of people don't really understand that this is in COBE and it's available. So we should be using it. And as I say, anything else that we want to add in, we can put into attributes. The one final thing in here, we've also got, and a lot of people don't realize this, in COBE, you're also able to put coordinates in. So what the coordinates do is they actually can extract from the model the XYZ locations, see the coordinates there, of where those items are. So that on your survey, Luke, you'd be able to tie back to that where that particular item is. You've got 10 items in the room, so you've obviously got related to the space.
That would work for a new build where you have a model and you know exactly where it's going on site. But for an existing build, I looked into this, and we essentially can't use coordinate data at all for an existing build. And the issue is you can't get the accuracy required. You can't reliably get the accuracy required to record where components are in a building without throwing a lot of money at the equipment required to record that data. We're doing this at the moment. We're doing this on our buildings, where we're actually going out to all of our buildings. It's a separate project, GIS project, but going out and recording all of the easting and northing coordinates for all of L&Q's stock. And there was a lot of work that was done into where do they record it from and how accurate is that record. So I think they've just agreed that it's within 3 meters of the front door. So they record it at the front door, but it has to be within an accuracy of 3 meters. So this is different. You can get that level of accuracy, but you wouldn't be able to get that inside a building or in a basement car park. There's no way of getting it there without setting up a triangulation system.
Yeah, there are some ways of doing it, which we can talk about offline. I mean, we're working with PRP, and also Clarion, for example, are just about to start a pilot with a company called GeoSlam. We're also working with GeoSlam. So what that allows you to do is walk through a building, and as you're working through, it's creating it's using scanning to create a point cloud and create plans from that as well. So there are mechanisms to do it.
So there's ways of doing it, but you have to use specific equipment. You can't just ask your engineer to go and survey and take their thing reading from their phone or something like that, or a GPS thing they have with them. Yeah.
No, you're right. All I'm saying is that there are ways of doing it with existing buildings, because quite frankly, that's exactly what we are doing.
George,
anyway.
Can we take it back to component level? And I think you got one of our I think it was one of the controllers there. It was down as a mechanical system, wasn't it? Could we get back to that, and let's just pretend that is an AOV. So it's an asset, it's a single line item, it's an AOV. And on our very specific project, we've started to identify what are the critical bits of data that need to be recorded such that ongoing the product can be validated. So I think that would be for that product, it would have attributes. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So the attributes. Do you remember we did something recently where we were looking at the fire safety? This came out of the hacked work. I'm just trying to find it now. In fact, no, I won't try and find that now. But basically what we need are the additional attributes. So for example, I think when we looked at it, do you remember you kindly spent a bit of time looking at all the asset types that we got.
Yeah, and it's in this instance it goes back to those essential characteristics in the first instance, because they can be validated. So it's that critical information that has already been identified in early design stage.
Yeah, so if that's the case, for example, we ought to be putting those critical characteristics into the attribute requirements here.
Yes.
Then test against that.
Yes, because that's how a maintenance engineer would validate that the product is working. It isn't the fact it opens or closes; it's the fact that it opens far enough in a time. It's allowed to, or it's sitting there and it's able to give a healthy status.
Yes.
where on that list do you link the attribute to the type, and can you link the attribute to the type in that specific location? Because you might find you have the same product, that one is going to might have different attributes, but two,
Absolutely.
it might be set up a different way.
Absolutely.
It might be the same product. One is installed vertically, one installed horizontally. So they'll act differently.
Because they're unique assets.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have attributes against types and attributes against components.
Okay. So type within location.
So George, as we talked before, so we're talking about a dynamic smoke ventilation system. There's a degree of intelligence in there, and there's communication. So real-time monitoring of the status of each component. How would that map back to that COBie database?
Well, the real time would be tied back to the individual instance. And if we look basically under instance or under the component, you've got, see here, we've got tag number.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the tag number is the one that you'd probably use. That this is coming through in this particular case. This might be coming through from Revit, and that would be its unique. It could be its unique ID. I mean, basically, it's a schema. So you could use that tag number, or you could use the individual asset identifier, which is the individual or you could have a barcoded item there. So you could therefore use that to tie it back to the sensor data that's coming back.
Okay, so we would, using an API or something, we would squirt status data, for instance, on a instance basis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this information we hold. So the approach that we've taken with this, we've taken COBie and we've created an asset information model database using the COBie schema.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that means that when we receive information in, it can automatically be tested and validated against the schema, and therefore it's automatically then going to be interoperable with anything else that's using IFC and COBie. So the connection that you're talking about there it's done in the software application. So that's what we do, and that's what other people like us would be inclined to do, I think. So we could take the feed. In fact, that's exactly what we're doing from Tim Aiken, who's one of my partners. He's done rigged his whole house up with sensors, and he's created an asset information model, which is then taking feeds through from all the sensors and giving him all the information about how frequently the dishwasher goes on and all that sort of stuff.
Which is probably a bit overkill for most housing associations, but the fire critical information of AOV on the third floor at Block X is in fault. I would imagine is fairly critical information to have.
Well, L&Q are doing something like that at the moment. We have a system that's been coined L&Q Connect, and it's essentially, in fact, I might be able to bring it up and show you. Essentially has schematics and then sensors set up against those.
Have you incorporated smoke vents into that?
So not quite, because what we've done is it's a JACE controller, and we've connected things like it's mainly for the boilers, but on top of that we've added in external sensors that are just a yes or no for the fire alarm is going off or the AOV is open or something like that. So it's a what do you call it? not binary. It's a true or false.
Yeah.
Can't remember what it's called.
Okay.
It's a true or false, but it's going off. The sensors we've installed in our boilers and stuff like that are things like the actual temperature and the flow rate and those sort of things. But the outside of that is things like door entry, CCTV, fire alarms, AOVs. Is it sending a signal that it's working, it's on or off?
Watchdog, yeah.
Yeah, that's all we've done. The idea is eventually to incorporate sensors, more detailed sensors into that. But initially, it's not meant. That's just the additional. It's not meant for anything outside of the boiler rooms, really.
I mean, that's it. That's fascinating because obviously this is the direction of travel, and again, it's bringing it back to what's the really critical information that has to be reported, and obviously, is it healthy? Is it in fault? Or has it been activated? But then, like you say, the batteries. Are the battery backup healthy, etc., etc. So we can take that discussion offline after this because that's quite interesting. But have you got anything there you could share?
Yeah, just give me a sec. I've got to log in because it doesn't realise that I'm on my computer. It's asking me to log into my Microsoft account again. And then log into my L&Q account afterwards. Oh, wait. Stay signed in. Yes. Wow. I went through 3 different login screens there. Let me just find one that I have information for.
Just whilst you're looking for that, I was just going to flash up what this is. Something James and Mo, you might want to just contribute to. This is a list of the hacked asset data list, and one of the questions that I had was whether fire rating is relevant to all of these items, and because originally on the hacked data they were basically saying fire rating was relevant to everything, and I don't know whether fire rating is relevant to, for example, an aircraft warning light or a heat pump. Yeah. So and also, is fire rating the right term? Because in MBS they don't use the term fire rating, they use fire integrity and fire insulation. So I put this out, and Will and a number of other people went through it, and they came back and said, right, here's one that needs to be in there, which is reaction to fire. Yeah. And also somebody else said appearance, which, whether it's mineral wool or foam, I don't know if that's an attribute that we ought to be collecting, possibly.
But that would be down to product, wouldn't it? Because you'd know from the product that it is a Celotex board, this particular model, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but at this point,
fire resistance.
Yeah, at this point, you wouldn't know what the product was. What this is asking what information you actually want to know about that type of product rather than the individual product itself. So, for example, the AOV, I think actually you put this down at the bottom.
Yeah. Because then it cross-references to the European standards, yeah.
Yeah, so Will's view is that fire rating is the wrong term, but there should be a reaction to fire. Is that right?
Yeah, because that's on the essential characteristics of most products of harmonized standards. You have to declare a reaction to fire. That's
So-
mandatory in European regulation, so it makes sense because that's a declared category that you would include that.
I would agree. I would also say fire rating. Fire rating isn't really defined through building regulations. It's more for resistance to fire and classification. Fire the reactant to fire. Sorry, the same thing. So the integrity and insulation itself really is the fire rating that of the component. Those two items. So. When you read fire rated doors, it's a little bit misleading because actually it's the resistance that it needs to provide, etc., and the components of that, especially with the reaction to fire, where we're looking at golden thread in particular for relevant buildings. Reaction to fire and the classification of materials there is essential. So that definitely would need to be in there. As for the appearance, I'm a little bit unsure what that contributes because your reaction to fire for foam would tell you that you're not. It's non-compliant. You wouldn't be using it unless there's a product out there that meets whatever reaction to fire that you're looking for, etc. So okay. I'm not too sure what the appearance would bring to the table in that respect.
Yeah, I suppose that might be if you're doing a survey.
Conscious, George, with time's pressing on. Can we bring it back to the core conversation, please?
Yeah, I've just got one question on that. Mo just said resistance to fire. Is that an additional attribute that we ought to be asking for?
Good question. Well, it's covered in integrity and insulation. So, for example, the other discussion that's going on simultaneous to this to do with cavity barriers, that requires 30 minutes one, 15 minutes the other. My mind's gone blank of which one it is immediately, but that's like a minimum performance of resistance. And ADB for external wall materials, if you bear with me, I can just jump in and have a look at what the exact terminology is used.
Because there's something else that I've been told about, which is surface spread of flame.
Well, the approved document B refers to its resisting fire spread over external walls, and within that then gives you the classifications. So the reaction to fire that you've got there, which is class A2S1DO, so that's what the material needs to provide. In certain instances, though, you need the component to provide you a certain amount of fire resistance. So you know, regardless of the reaction to fire, also, if I've explained myself correctly there, the component would need to provide like 30 minutes fire resistance rather than a fire rating.
So fire resistance should be a value that we have, and what you're saying is that you would normally understand what that was as a function of knowing the value of fire integrity and fire insulation.
Correct.
So you could say it's like a calculated value.
Yeah, and the approved document defines that for a number of materials, components, elements as well. Of what that's needed in relation to building height and location within the building itself.
I think it's difficult to do it against components like that because a lot of those components would not, like you've got there, you've got blanks on a lot of them. A lot of them wouldn't even have a fire rating as such.
No.
That's right. So the whole idea of this is to make this specific to that particular asset type. Exactly. Okay. So we want to be asking questions because I mean, one of the things that I was confused about was nobody had put anything down against doors, which surprised me a bit on this.
Oh yeah, internal door. Saw it just there.
Yeah.
So if we were sticking to the AOV, just as the example, that wouldn't, the AOV itself doesn't need to have a reaction to fire classification or fire rating as such.
Fire rate, correct. It doesn't have a fire rating, but like I say, because it's a construction product, it has to state under the harmonised standards, it has to state a reaction to fire classification.
Okay.
Okay. Luke, were you able to access the system?
Yeah, I'll just share my screen. This is our.
Thanks for joining us.
This is our energy team, which is nice. They're a small team, sort of independent of L&Q as such, but it means they're able to test out little projects like this. So I think there's some issues they're having with the connections at the moment. So the numbers are coming through wrong. But the idea is you have your heating system, and it has sensors attached to it that will be attached to specific parts of the thing. So I can see that's the output, heating flow to the property from the boilers. And then I have another one there, heating flow to the property. I've got the cold water booster pump, which is there, and there should be a sensor on that. So it looks like these flow sensors are not working, but this is fine. This is saying it's cleared. It hasn't actually got a sensor value on there, which is weird. You've got your water tanks temperature, so there's a live temperature for that one, 12.10 degrees centigrade. The water tank. And then the idea is to put as an add-on, we were like, okay, well, we'll throw in Boolean values for your CCTV, your warden call, or anything we can attach it to. Or anything we can record it's working or it isn't, or it's sending a signal saying it's working or it's not. We're attached to there.
So would one of your maintenance engineers have access to this so they could see the critical essential characteristics?
The idea from this is once all like the connection issues and stuff like that we've had and the false results that are coming through, once we can flag all of those, the idea is this gets sent through to the customer service center. The customer service center then pick it up and go, we've been recorded as there's something wrong with the temperature on the water tank there, or the boiler's not working or something like that. And they would raise their order to the contractor to go out and check it. But on top of that, the contracts.
Sorry.
Yeah, on top of that, the specific team that's maintaining this, and this is the nice thing and reason why we can test it here, is because the contractor, in the case of a lot of L&Q's our energy sites, the contractor is actually L&Q. We're working on trying to bring an in-house team to maintain this that would then subcontract where needed. But yeah, that's the idea. That's the reason why we can test this, because we can flag it and go, right, send it to the contractor, L&Q, the internal team, for them to maintain it. Yeah.
And if it can be rectified remotely against the set essential characteristics or target values, then that will be done remotely as well. Okay.
Yeah. So it might be the first thing might be resetting the sensor remotely, just resetting the system, see if that clears it.
Sure.
And then flag up. It's same with cars, isn't it? You have the same thing with a car. When you plug in your sensor into the car's computer, the first thing you do is you reset all the faults and then wait to see if they flag up again. And if they do, then you know you've got an issue with something.
Okay. I'm conscious there's only sort of 15 minutes left. One thing we haven't really touched on is competence, is the recording of competence. So that's we touched on it at design stage, but obviously we've got competence of installation, competence of commissioning, competence of maintenance, and really that's in terms of golden thread. That's been highlighted as an area of weakness at the moment, and it's an open question really. What are people's thoughts on how we might want to record that against the assets we've been talking about?
I think the just jumping in there, what we have now is by way of the certificate. The installer has to be certified. So if you take a domestic electrical installation, the Part P, the NICE certificate would be the way to record that competency. And then some of the things I think that you work with, there isn't, if I'm not mistaken, there isn't like an AOB installer certification.
There is now, actually. Yes, it's SDI 19. There is one. There absolutely is one. Yeah. As a result of Hackett.
SDI 19. So I'm going to put that in my contracts. So that's what I want to see. I want to see that the installation has been certified by a competent installer, and that I think encompasses the issue that you had highlighted the last time, that you could have a compliant product here and a compliant product there, but if they don't work properly with them, then they're actually probably worse than nothing at all. Yeah. So that's my thoughts on it. I think that's the way that we can possibly do that.
I guess the question in terms of there is a need there, and I guess the question is how we might record that, and you as operators, is that something it's the golden thread rather than the asset? I don't know.
So I think that would be where it recorded in the Kobe thing. So what George was showing us with the Kobe, you'd have your contractor and their contact, and then within the documents you would have the certificate that says they're compliant with thing linked to the contractor, the contact. Who's the supplier or the installer or whatever they're recorded as in there. So I suspect that's where that would be recorded. I know we're currently having an issue in L&Q at the moment where, and I think this is industry wide, where people are breaching fire stopping, where contractors are going out and breaching fire stopping or breaching asbestos, for example. That's one that's happening quite a lot. And the issue is the industry are sending out contractors who aren't necessarily asbestos certified, so they're just drilling a hole in a wall, their engineer is, not realising, because they haven't been trained, that actually they need to check for asbestos if the building's older than 2001. And that's something we're having to do, where we're having to start recording that data, and we're literally going to our contractors and saying, please, can you send us your asbestos certification for your company or engineers or whatever it might be. But I think capturing it at this stage at the Kobe data field would be the best way of doing it, and actually saying this contractor has this certification and here's the document. And yes, that might go against every building that's constructed, but then that's not necessarily a problem, because you don't want to be in the issue where the certification only lasts 2 years and they stop certifying after that because they're like, well, I was only checked it once the first time. You want to confirm each time.
I think it's also a matter of making sure that the client is providing the contractor that's about to go and do the work with accurate and reliable information about the risks that they're likely to encounter. Just giving them access to the O&Ms is a rubbish way of doing that, because the O&Ms are likely to not be current. So room references and things like that aren't likely to be current, and therefore there should be a duty of care on the person that's actually commissioning the work to ensure that that they're adequately informed. It's not just a matter of the contractor being certified, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. So I know for the asbestos thing for L&Q, for example, every order we send out has access to the asbestos register for that particular property, and you'll be able to, the contractor in theory can download the report for that.
Yeah.
And once a contractor's been to site and has undertaken a maintenance operation on it, how is that typically captured? What's the critical data that needs to be captured as part of the golden thread, but fundamentally to make sure that the fire safety product deploys as it should do when it's needed to?
Well, there you go. That's a question. That's a question. How do you capture that's going back to how do you capture the change? If someone's gone out and changed the smoke detectors, how do you capture the smoke detectors? And that's the problem we're having at the moment, where we're not necessarily recording what smoke detectors and how many and where they are in a building relating to their AOV. So if they go out, they've gone out and changed them. Well, one, there's a cost implication, because now they might have had 10 years. That's now been renewed for 5 detectors, but not the other 5.
Yeah.
And we might be working on a life expectancy of 10 years for the system as a whole. Small individually, but over a lot of properties, it adds up.
And that's
I don't know. I think that's
the
an IT solution that's needed for that. I don't think that's a person who is. It's too much data for a person to deal with. I think that's an IT solution.
Yeah, well, I agree. Well, it's actually a process solution that needs to be supported by IT. So, for example, just picking up on that one, it's a status change. Yeah. So, one of the things that I think we need to be recording is when something has been tested and failed. Yeah, because you really want to know which ones have failed, even though that means that, you know, if that generates another work instruction, that means somebody's got to go back the following week. You really want to know which ones have failed, because during that week, it might mean that you've got to carry out some remedial or not remedial, so some mitigation task to make sure that particular building is safe. So that feedback, that's one of the things that we're arguing for now, is often this information is captured in a CAFM system, but it's just held in the CAFM system. And until you look at the job plans to see, you know, what has or hasn't been done, you wouldn't know what the impact is on your building. Whereas the client should have an asset information model, in my view, that gives them the dashboard to see what's actually happening in these various different applications.
So, George, a contractor's gone to site, and using Luke's example, they've changed the smoke detector. And what requirements would you want in place to get the information how the information of that detector has been changed to update the asset information model?
They should provide a data template, which then gets fed back to the asset information model. And that is probably, ideally, that should be an automated output from the software application that they are using. And so it should be populated. So if, for example, you've got Keystone, and Keystone is actually being used, I know it's often not used at that level of detail, but let's say it is, and you say that this particular fire detector has been swapped out for a new one because it failed or whatever, that probably or should be being recorded in Keystone. But when it's then finished in Keystone, it ought to come back into the federated asset data, because by law, I believe you're supposed to be keeping the health and safety file and the O&M up to date.
Yeah,
and O&M, you shouldn't be reliant on the fact you've got half a dozen different systems around the business, which probably aren't coordinated.
Could I just ask something without trying to veer off track too much? But a contractor was just mentioned then. What happens in the scenario of privately owned dwellings, flats with smoke detectors, etc., where you have residents that could potentially dabble with those items, or even doors, etc., that need maintenance? Is that written into home user guides? That's not something that I'm sort of aware of. And do they then have to report within a large building of height? Do they have to report that they're making adjustments, changes, whatever, so that the right components can be replaced?
I think you would struggle to get that information as a report. I think yes, perfect world, yes. Maybe you'd want to install sensors to record any change to that smoke detector if it's been disabled or removed or something like that. But the only way I can think around that is, for example, what we do in L&Q at the moment, where we every time a gas certificate, a gas check is carried out, we have them inspect the detectors in the flats as well. And the same for the electrical test. We have them go out, carry out electrical test, and then also tell us about the detectors that are installed and make sure they're all up to scratch, are all working. So I don't know how you'd get residents involved in that sort of change. I think that's a whole nother story. You've got to make that very simple for them.
Yeah.
Or automated, that they're not even involved. So almost like a plug and play. They pull out the detector, they put a new detector in themselves, and it records, oh, a new one's been put in, and updates the system. I think that's the level you've got to get to for that. Yeah.
Do you have a view on that, Jack?
But for the what you're saying about the contractor with really what we should be doing is, if I was raising an order to SE Controls to go out and replace, I've got an issue, the ventilation, the AOV isn't working. I send out SE Controls, and in theory I should be sending them a full asset list. In theory I should also know what detectors are running fault or something like that, what is running fault. And you should be able to look at that list and go, okay, well, we're on site and it's these 4. And then you go, okay, we've replaced these 4, then send that back to us and update, and it would update our asset management system. The reality is we're not at that level of detail. And this is where this is trying to get to. Yeah.
So one of the sort of outputs from the discussions is it's got to be a common platform, and whoever the contractor is who's undertaking works, the information they submit has got to effectively be seamlessly integrated and update that platform.
And that's where you'd use COBE as your data exchange. So your data exchange will always be in a COBE format. So whatever system we use has to be compatible with COBE. Whatever system you use has to be compatible. So yes, we might raise an order and send it to you, whatever system we're sending, but the actual data exchange is through a COBE file format. So your system picks it up, you send it back, and our system's essentially talking to each other without a person involved.
Yeah, 100%.
That's exactly right, and that's why it's not a common. It's not a single platform. It's a single, if you like, data environment where all of the different applications are sharing information in that sort of coordinated way.
Okay, I'm conscious we've got 4 minutes left. Does anybody got any burning questions or anything they particularly want to raise? No,
not from me. No.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for all of for your time. Really appreciate giving up that time. What we'll do now is Rehan and myself and Scott will listen back through the recordings, digest, and start to pick out some of the big ticket items, which I think there's a common theme coming through this. And one of them is effectively we want to move to a situation where we all use a COBE data exchange for assets, because it suddenly could make life. That's the kind of thing that we can that we can pull out of this. So yeah, once we've been through that exercise and put together some kind of document, we'll circulate it for comment first, and then hopefully get to a point where we can publish.
Yeah, what we'll also do is we're on the hacked housing asset data group. We're putting the data templates actually up onto the systems, the online system at the moment, and we're going to make that available for people to be able to contribute to, so that Luke, for example, Luke was showing us earlier a load of work that he's done, really good work. And what we need to do is then maybe make that available so that we can then put that into the data sets. I mean, what I'd like to do, Luke, is maybe even this afternoon, if you've 5-10 minutes, we perhaps have a chat on that, because we can probably take that data and we can update it. So I think being able to then get the collective wisdom of this group to apply their knowledge against those items would be really good. Do you agree, Jack?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's not miss out on any opportunities to harvest some good work that's been already created. So fantastic, yeah. Really look forward to that, Luke, and in whatever way you can share it. I'm sorry I missed it. My boss said be here.
That's right.
Will, can I give a suggestion as well?
Yes,
I think
please.
it is really interesting conversation. What is it possible for us to share that Excel with the question and Riba that you are first to share? Could we share this with other work stream as well? Then they just feel the George, is it possible? Because I think you have access to other work stream as well. I'm member of the architecture, then I can share with them and ask all the members to fill it. I think if we gather all this data with this recording of this workshop, I think we can access to more data and put it together in form of a document.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, yeah. So what's the action on that, Rahana? So
I think
if we
we just share with them, ask them to fill this Excel that will share it with us, and then I can gather all data and make like a statistic from them and put it in one Excel as a form, and then it will come along with this document.
Good. Okay, let's do that.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you all for your time, and good to see you. And thanks for teaching me about Together Mode. Suddenly made Teams so much more fun. Great. Well, thank you all, and I'll be in touch. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers, Will.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you very much. Take care.